Hello, everyone. This is Piero San Giorgio. Today, I'm very happy to have with us Dmitry Orlov. Good afternoon, Dmitry.
Good to be with you.
For those who don't know you, you have predicted a lot of the things that are happening in the past decades. You're the author of the big bestseller book, Five Stages of Collapse, of also another book which I found great and that you guys who are listening should read is Reinventing Collapse. And recently, besides your numerous posts on your blog, which is called Club Orlov, you have just come out with a new book called Uncontrolled Chaos. And I've not read it yet, but it's on the way from the delivery. So, Dimitri, in the last 5 years, let's say, everything you've talked about the collapse of the West seems to be happening. Where do you feel we are standing now, and what do you explain in your book about this trend that is continuing to advance and accelerating?
Well, it's possible to separate collapse into stages and talk about a canonical sequence of collapses, but really it's all happening at various paces at the same time. So these are not really not stages of collapse, but more facets or aspects of collapse. And it's still useful to talk about each one as they proceed. So, for instance, from the point of view of political collapse, we're now seeing um, the second coming of Donald Trump, who is a non-institutional player, non-institutional character. And at the same time, we see all of these multi-billionaires lining up behind him because they see the United States crashing. And they want, of course, being multi-billionaires, they want to profit from this crash as opposed to lose all of their net worth. So they're lining up behind Trump, and Trump is doing the typical sort of destructive Trump things with either installing tariffs or postponing tariffs, etc. All very destructive and pointless to a large extent, but it signals that really the political system as it has existed in the United States is is heading uh, for its demise, if you will. It's no longer functional. At the same time, we see the same sort of thing happening throughout the West, where the fig leaf of democracy has been blown away in many places, where Marine Le Pen, who is the winner, is now has an ankle bracelet. Um, and ADG, which is the most Alternative für Deutschland, is the most popular party in Germany and is not allowed in the government. Instead, somebody who is supposed to be the next chancellor, Bundeskanzler, is not somebody that the Germans would accept. He's just some banker. So now we have two countries that are headed up by bankers, Macron and what's his name, Merz.
Yes.
Um, and Scholz and Merz end up to Schmerz, which is what the Germans are going to be facing. It's German for pain.
Yes.
And at the same time, and in other parts of Europe, the fig leaf of democracy has also been very much blown away. There was an attempt at a color revolution uh, that happened um, against the government of Serbia, which has failed.
Yes.
If you notice, color revolutions are failing left and right. They just
Yes.
don't succeed anymore. There was also an attempt at um, a coup in Georgia. Georgia is now having serious second thoughts about European integration, realizing that that's probably not a good idea anymore. In Moldavia, we have the Gaugaz leader. The Gaugaz are an interesting tribe. They're a Turkic tribe, but they're Orthodox Christian, and they're very much aligned with Russia. And she is now under house arrest. Um, the winner in the presidential election in Romania has been badly mistreated and banned from participating. So really, we're talking about some kind of a very strange situation where an unelected entity that was initially created by the CIA, by the Americans, which was the European Union. That's that's kind of the civil part of uh, American colonial administration in Europe, the military part being NATO. Now they're both being disowned by the United States, who have no use for Europe as a whole anymore. The United States really want to just completely disown both NATO and the European Union. And at the same time, the European Union is trying to assert its authority to the point of destroying national democracies within the European Union. So political collapse is really far along. Um, in terms of commercial collapse, well, we see the fact that the American destruction of the pipelines in the Baltic have caused a wave of deindustrialization, which was going to happen in any case. The idea of destroying the energy base of Europe with these stupid windmills and solar panels because of the dioxide hypothesis, which by the way will never be proven. You know, that has pretty much destroyed the industrial base of Europe. It's no longer competitive. And then the fact that you know, the Germans destroyed their nuclear reactors and are in the process of knocking down their remaining coal-fired power plants, and the fact that the French have these old nuclear reactors that they cannot replace and can't possibly extend their useful life forever, that pretty much means lights out in most of Europe. Europe will not be able to sustain industry for very much longer. Um, so that in terms of commercial collapse, that's what's happening. Um, in terms of cultural collapse, you have basically um, European national cultures more or less evaporating. There is still some lingering memory of them, but their religious basis is gone. And if you have what has been for the past 1,000 years a Christian civilization deprived of its Christian basis, you don't have a civilization anymore. You have some internet memes and some video clips and some talking heads spouting nonsense and maybe some fads and just general degeneracy, but that doesn't add up to a culture. Culture is something that provides lasting cultural monuments in art and in literature and architecture. None of that is happening anymore. And at the same time, there is population replacement happening in Europe, where in Sweden now there are entire neighborhoods that are no-go territories for white people. So basically, the white people who built the West are being sidelined. They're no longer even being allowed in parts of their own territory. Um, and if you look at various parts, like Birmingham, for instance, second largest city in England, it's now basically a uh, third world rundown city with garbage not being removed, with rats running around. It's really a sad picture. So that is really the stage of collapse that we're at. All the it's all engines go. All you know, firing. The collapse in Europe and in the United States is firing on all cylinders. And of course, to top it all off, there is the what seems to be the real sanctions war or tariff war, if you will, between the United States and China, where China has decided that it won't be trading with the United States anymore, which it can do. Now, to figure out whether China can sustain that sort of confrontation or whether the United States can sustain that sort of confrontation, on the one hand, just compare the percentage of GDP that China gets from its exports to the United States, and consider zeroing that out because that's what's actually going to happen. And on the other hand, consider China's GDP growth, annual GDP growth projected for this year. Now, which do you imagine is larger, its trade with the United States or its GDP growth for the year? It's the GDP growth. And the other question is, if China doesn't export all of this stuff to the United States, what is it going to do? Is it going to throw it all in the ocean or in a ditch somewhere? No, it's going to sell it to somebody else for maybe a little less profit. But on the other hand, the less profit is actually good because the profits that it derived from the US trade were pretty much dollar denominated, and the dollar is no longer really necessary for world trade, as the BRICS nations have proven. So, what is the dollar needed for? What is this dollar surplus needed for? Well, nothing at all. But on the other hand, what can the United States still do without Chinese imports? Walk into any Walmart in the United States and try to find something that isn't made in China. Uh, Try to build any manufactured product without using nuts and bolts that are Chinese made. Try to hammer together one of those ticky-tacky American houses um, uh, with nails that are made in the United States instead of in China. Well, the nails are going to be twice as expensive, at least. And it goes on and on like that. And on top of that, China has restricted or banned the sales of strategic minerals to the United States, rare earth minerals, without which military contractors cannot build a single weapons system in the United States. So, from that point of view, the United States has pretty much hamstrung itself by canceling its trade with China. So that's where we stand.
Yes, indeed, and it seems to me, I don't know what's your impression of that, that it's not recoverable. And even if Trump clumsily, as usual, he's trying to cut down from the American empire and trying to um, make it again a nation instead of an empire. Uh, Even at best, it seems to be too little, too late. What do you think?
Well, I don't think that the United States as a going concern has any sort of a future that isn't just absolutely miserable. What Trump is trying to do is nothing. He's doing his best to accomplish absolutely nothing while making as much noise as possible. And the only thing that he actually succeeds in doing is causing um, instability in the financial markets, which his friends can profit from. So he tells them ahead of time that he's going to impose some ridiculous tariffs, and the market responds, and his friends make money. And then he cancels his plan to impose ridiculous tariffs, and the markets respond, and his friends make even more money, and that makes his billionaire friends happy, and makes him happy, and makes the rest of Americans sort of not understand what's going on because they think that they're supposed to be making America great again, but they're not. Um, in terms of things that he's proposed, like taking over Panama Canal, well, the Panamanians told him no. Um, they they pretty much so far the only victory is that military ships, Navy ships uh, of the United States Navy will be able to pass through Panama Canal without paying free of charge. Great victory, that's wonderful. I mean, it's small change, but at least it's something. But the rest of it was just noise. Or the whole Greenland thing, the Greenlanders said, no, we don't want to be part of the United States. And what does Trump do? Well, nothing. He just sort of steps back and switches to some other issue. Or uh, well, the whole idea of Greenland is, it's a plan that has been around for ages and ages. The Americans taking over Greenland, because that would give them a slice of the Arctic and it would give them control over the North Pole, theoretically. The Lomonosov Ridge is very rich in natural resources. The idea is that it will be possible technically to exploit these resources. But the point is that only the Russians have the technology to do so. The Russians have an atomic icebreaker fleet. The Americans do not. The Americans don't know how to build these things, have no plans to do so. Um, and so this would be a wasted effort on their part. It would be basically a stranded asset. What else? The plan to make Canada into the 51st state. Well, that's ridiculous too. Um, they couldn't even get Mexico to do anything in particular that Trump wanted. Peace in the Ukraine within 24 hours? No. Within a month? No. Within 100 days? No. Sometime this year. Um, all that's happened so far is the Russians agreed to stop destroying Ukrainian energy facilities for 30 days, and the Ukrainians were supposed to do the same, but didn't. So the Ukrainians are continuing to attack Russian energy facilities, and the Russians are just stockpiling rockets at this point. So when those 30 days expire, it's goodbye Ukrainian energy grid altogether. They're just going to shut it all down. So Trump has not succeeded in doing anything at all. His 100 days are up. The tariff thing has caused people in Congress to sort of decide that maybe it's the legislature that should decide what the tariff should be. All they have to do is get a veto-proof majority in Congress, and Trump's ability to impose tariffs will evaporate. And what will be gone? What will he still be able to do? Um, what else has he done? He's tried to repatriate some illegal immigrants. At this rate, it'll take, what, 100 years to repatriate all of them? So again, it's nothing. So there's absolutely nothing going on, but lots of noise. Trump is a great big noisemaker.
As they say in
That's all he is.
as they say in France, there is a valeur sûre, something sure, is that when in trouble, America can always bomb or at least try some people in sandals somewhere in the Middle East. However, this time it seems to be harder than it used to be. How do you see this Middle East, Israel, and the Houthis, and of course Iran behind, which are all linked now to BRICS anyway? It seems that the US cannot even field in the sea, it's not the right word, cannot even not even ship what used to be four carrier groups at the same time. Now it's down to two, maybe three. It's not the power that it used to be.
Well, yes, the idea is to posture and look dangerous without actually achieving anything on the ground. Everybody knows that the U.S. doesn't have the money anymore to do another Gulf War. Now, the point is that the last time they did a Gulf War, it cost them something like 2 trillion. It took a year and a half to organize. They had lots of other countries helping. The Gulf nations were willing to offer facilities for organizing this invasion force, and this was all against Iraq, which had subsisted under sanctions for a very long time and was weak, was really, really weak. It had obsolete Soviet-made weapons at that point, none of it more modernized, rather dispirited, and had a leader who had produced some internal conflict. Uh, Now they're talking about attacking Iran. Now that is a ridiculous idea. That is just a completely ridiculous idea. If they do bomb Iran, the response would be rather devastating, and I think it wouldn't actually happen. I think at this point, this is all just threats, just idle threats. So the United States is very much reduced to making idle threats. It couldn't even persuade the Houthis to stop attacking U.S. military vessels. Now the Houthis made a generous offer. Why don't you stop trying to bomb us, and we'll stop trying to bomb your military vessels in the Red Sea? How about that? As far as everybody else, we'll still impose a blockade, but at least we won't be sinking your military vessels. Is that a good deal? And of course, it would be very embarrassing if the United States agreed to that deal. But the fact that something like that has actually been voiced shows the level to which the United States has sunk in the eyes of the world.
Now, as on a personal note, you did flee the well or quit the USSR. Was it in the 70s or early 80s to move to North America? And then more recently, of course, you did the other way around. You came back to what is now Russia, of course, country that I visit often. So I can vouch that it is a prosperous country and doing very good. Um, how do you foresee the first of all the world without this collapsing West, and what is the leadership role, or at least what is the role that Russia will take in this new world?
I don't think Russia will take a leadership role. Why does it need that? Russia has everything it needs. It has all of the industry except maybe smartphones and a few other things that China is willing to provide. It has all the energy it needs. It has all the food it needs, except for tropical fruit. But there are nations in Morocco, for instance, is willing to provide. And Abkhazia provides fruit as well. So that's not a problem. So why does Russia need the headache of trying to lead the world? Let the world do whatever the world will do. Um, in terms of the West kind of disappearing, collapsing, and being impossible to deal with, that's not an issue for Russia. Once again, Russia has already imported everything from the West that it could ever want in terms of art, in terms of architecture, in terms of literature. It's all available in Russian in translation, some of it taught in schools. Um, some of the stuff, like Tom Sawyer, for instance, isn't even allowed in the United States because of the use of the N word. Well, that's very popular in Russia still because Russia doesn't cancel culture. That's not a Russian thing. Um, and so Russia doesn't need the West. Russia doesn't need the West for anything at all. Uh, there's a transition period where there's still a lot of uh, mostly commercial energy related links, but fewer and fewer every year. So right now, Europe is buying a lot of liquefied natural gas from Russia, but in the future, that liquefied natural gas will go to Asia. That is quite obvious that this is going to happen. And what will Europe do? Well, Russia doesn't really care. It's not a concern. Um, there are a lot of people who think that somebody will pop out of the ground and replace the United States, that somebody wants to become the United States and pretend to run the world, that somebody wants their currency to be the reserve currency and the main currency for international trade. Why? Why can't the world trade in their own digital currencies through central bank mechanisms, as China and Russia are doing right now? They're not using the US dollar anymore. Iran and Russia are no longer using the US dollar. Um, More and more countries are accepting this system, which is completely opaque to the West. So nobody in the West or in the United States, especially, has no idea what trade is happening, how the paperwork is being done, how the money is being handed around, what the price mechanisms are. All of that has just completely gone dark as far as the United States is concerned. And what it will look like for the West is their quote unquote free markets and brokerage schemes and all of that will just shrivel. It'll just shrivel up. That's all that'll happen. And as far as who's in charge, well, nobody will be in charge. It's a multipolar world. Everybody gets to have their own national interests. The countries that have sovereignty, not every country can have sovereignty. Not every country is a country. Syria is no longer a country. It's now an ungovernable territory. So the Baltics, for instance, if the European Union falls apart, they cease to be countries. They become territories, basically defunct states. So we will have some number of sovereign nations with their national interests, with their trade policies that are bilateral with other countries. There may be some multilateral pricing mechanisms for key commodities like oil, natural gas, etc. But for the rest, it's all bilateral trade in the currencies of these countries, digitally performed through these countries' national banks. And what does this have to do with Europe or the United States? Absolutely nothing.
It seems in this transition time that less now with Trump in the US, but certainly countries of Europe, especially France, Britain, certainly also Germany, but more importantly, the EU, are having extremely bellicist um, rhetoric, at least, versus Russia. Now, is that a suicide wish, or is it some way to control populations?
Well, there's an old Russian joke about a man walking down the street and there's a woman up on a balcony and the woman starts screaming, "Help me, this man is about to rape me." And the man stops and says, "Woman, how can I rape you if you're up on the balcony?" And she says, "I'm coming right down." So that's the position that Europe is putting itself in. It can't do anything except make a pretend that it's a menace to Russia by pretending that Russia is about to attack it. Russia has absolutely no interest in any part of Europe except uh, ones that I can enumerate. It is probably interested in Nikolaev and Odessa regions. It may be interested in Dnipropetrovsk region. It may be interested in Sumy region, but more for a security barrier against weirdness that will be erupting all over to the west of there. It may be interested in various other small places that are very much Russia aligned and might be friendly towards Russia. Moldova is right now dominated by the European Union and um, by Romania and doing extremely badly as a result. There's the Gaugas people who are Turkic but Russian speaking. Russian Orthodox want to be part of Russia. There's Transnistria, which is basically a piece of Russia that got stuck between Moldova and the Ukraine, of all places, that wants to be part of Russia. But that's really it. Russia doesn't really have any ambitions, territorial ambitions. It it has humanitarian ambitions to safeguard the interests of Russian populations wherever they may be. And it also has interests in inviting in people from wherever in the world they happen to be, but certainly Europe, who are not really aligned with what's going on in Western Europe, but are aligned with the value system of Russia and want to bring their families and children and live happily ever after in Russia. And this sort of thing has happened many times throughout history, where Europe just basically goes down for the count. There's the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, etc. Times when Europe became basically unlivable, and anybody who could left Europe and moved to Russia and never moved back, except In some cases, the Germans moved back, but now they moved back to Russia. Now the Germans that went to Germany want to move back to Russia. Um, so that is something that Russia is interested in. It wants the people, but it wants specific people. It doesn't need the territory. If you look at a map, nobody has ever looked at a map of Russia and said, could be a little larger, couldn't it? Yeah, that's not something that springs to mind when you look at the map of Russia, right?
For
Why would
sure,
Russia need more land,
for sure.
especially if it's densely populated with people who are difficult and spoiled?
To say the least. In fact, and apathetic. So I don't believe there's going to be reform. I remind who is we have been with Dmitry Orlov, author of many books, Five Stages of Collapse. Your latest book is out. I will put the links on the description of the video. I thank you very much. Perhaps as a closing, what do you advise to people living in the West or in America who are listening to us today? As individuals, what should they do? Should we continue being survivalists, preparing, or we should just leave while we can?
Well, it depends. It depends on each person's situation. So there is the idea of moving to the land. Um, I have a friend, Greg, who was living on a homestead in Tennessee and inviting people to join him. And there's land there, and um, there are ways to survive, and not just survive, but do very well, thrive, have lots of children, and live happily alongside their Amish neighbors, who are very forthcoming with advice and help. And it turns out that nobody really wanted to join him, um, because people are just too spoiled. There's also the idea of going someplace else in the world, and that you think is going to be stable and prosperous, and living there, and just bringing yourself, your mindset, your habits, your expectations there, and expecting to make a go of it. Well, if you want to live somewhere else, you have to become someone else. So if you want to live in Russia, become Russian first, then move here in that order. If you can't quite manage that, then at least learn the language first. Um, you know, there are no easy answers, is my point. And it all hinges on what personal changes, including painful, uncomfortable, wrenching changes, somebody is willing to make. Most people just want the show to go on, want to live comfortably ever after, no matter what happens in the world. They ask questions like, how do I move my net worth to Russia? You don't. Okay, that's the basic answer. You don't necessarily start from scratch, but you don't expect to just basically move to Russia and set up shop. That just isn't going to work. Um, so there are no easy answers.
Indeed, and life is like that. There's no easy answers to life. Dmitry Orlov, thank you very much. And
Thank
again,
you.
all the links are below, and we'll speak soon, I hope. Take care.
I hope so too.